What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Kick-Ass Podcast. I hope you're having a fantastic week so far. We are here a little bit early to cover AEW Dynamite this week. It just aired last night and was a fantastic show. But I would be remiss to wait until the weekend with the news that dropped today, the reports that are coming out regarding CM Punk, and some news that he may have wanted to leave AEW recently. So, with that being said, guys, we are obviously not going to waste too much time before getting into the show itself. We're going to discuss the reports that came out regarding the CM Punk news going on with Hangman Page, and then, of course, Jon Moxley. The moving up of their, what was damn sure, for certain going to be the main event at the All Out pay-per-view in Chicago, less than a month from now, 2-ish weeks out. So with that being said, like I said, we'll get right into the show, but thank you so much for following and downloading and listening to the show and all that good stuff. Feel free to follow us on Twitter at ASHMANNS, that's me personally, and the show's Twitter page at KickAshPodcast_. And of course on TikTok as well at Kickash Podcast. But with all that out of the way, we will get into the big news that dropped this afternoon, and then that'll obviously bleed right over into the AEW Dynamite review itself. But the news broke today from Fightful Select, and I believe they mentioned as well that they got their first inclination or first tidbit of news from the Wrestling Observer. But then Sean Ross Sapp followed up with his own sources and released his own report over at FightfulSelect.com. So shout out to them. I'll be reading today from the WrestlingPurist.com site, so shout out to those guys in particular. But the headline coming out was that CM Punk reportedly may have almost decided to not come to Dynamite last night. So we'll get it right into the article itself. It says, CM Punk opened the August 17th edition of AEW Dynamite by challenging Hangman Adam Page to a rematch for the AEW World Championship, which was apparently not planned. Today, Fightful Select confirmed the Wrestling Observer's report that this portion of the segment was not planned. In May of this year, Punk defeated Page for the title at AEW Dynamite, AEW Double or Nothing, before he was forced onto the shelf for months due to injury. However, it has been reported that before that there was word that CM Punk and Hangman Page did not see eye to eye on a portion of the promo material for an episode of Dynamite in the lead up to their match at Double or Nothing. The Fightful Select report went on to note that they were told by several sources within AEW that they felt as though the situation that occurred on the August 17th episode was, quote, unfair to Page if he wasn't aware of it. One source went on to say that, quote, even if he was aware of it, what would he have done? Charged to the ring past Tony Khan, interrupted a promo he knew he wasn't supposed to be a part of? There was no way Hangman could have, quote, won in that situation, end quote. It was also reported that while Hangman was at the venue, there has not been any word of him responding in any particular way, with those who spoke to Fightful saying that Hangman isn't a confrontational person and is generally well-liked among the roster. The report then states that the belief among many on the roster who Fightful spoke to was that Punk was of the belief that Hangman went into business for himself in the build to their match at Double or Nothing, and that Punk took the opportunity to dish out a, quote, receipt in his August 17th promo. It has been made clear that was just the locker room speculation as opposed to Punk directly telling anyone that those were his intentions. From Punk's point of view, the Hangman Page promo in the lead up to Double or Nothing has alluded to Punk's prior issues with Colt Cabana happening during a week where Punk was not at the show, while Punk's direct shot at Hangman on August 17th occurred while Page was present. Sources familiar with the situation have claimed that CM Punk has often verbally expressed his displeasure to the point where they recently thought he might end up quitting the company. Those close to him did note that he might have almost decided to stay home instead of showing up to the August 17th Dynamite event, but they do not think he would have quit the company. The report went on to state that while there has not been any indication that Punk plans on leaving AEW, one veteran said that there have been, quote, threats being levied, end quote. Punk, the AEW World Champion, is set to face the interim champion Jon Moxley on the August 24th episode of Dynamite for the championship, a match which the report stated was a late decision. So far, nothing has been made public about what exactly could have led to Punk's current frustrations that would have led him to not show up to Dynamite. And that is the conclusion of the article, again, from WrestlingPurist.com, so shout out to them. But man, a lot there, guys. A lot that seemingly came out of nowhere. I mean, unless I completely have been under a different rock, and if I have, please let me know, guys. Feel free to call me out. But I was not under the impression that there was anything wrong or any type of situation going on with like the relationship between Tony Khan and CM Punk or upper management now that's being, supposedly quoted out there in AEW and CM Punk, and things like that. And a few things, especially towards the end, it was kind of contradictory where at one point there was thoughts that he might end up quitting the company, but then that and just kind of just like going back and rereading it, like saying that they thought that he might end up quitting the company, and then there was at one point thought that he wouldn't even show up to the Dynamite show last night, but then so far nothing was made public of what's going on. And then another veteran said that they haven't heard of any threats being levied, and there was no indication that Punk was leaving AEW. So it's just like, I don't know, it's very confusing, and that's a lot of the reasons why I just avoid a lot of shit, but when news to this magnitude kind of hits the Twitterverse, you know what I mean? It's kind of hard to ignore, right? Especially when, for me personally, and we'll obviously get into that more when we get into the Dynamite review, but there was a weird feeling coming out of Dynamite in the sense that all of a sudden probably the biggest matchup AEW is ever going to have. I mean, if you think about it, and it should be, if it's not, it at least should be. So, sorry guys, a random ad just started playing on my screen there. But, yeah, it's just, to me, like, all this just kind of came out of nowhere, and it's just very alarming, and part of me, as I was saying, like, that's why I really don't buy into a lot of this stuff. But like I was saying, but when it gets to this magnitude, it kind of has to at least be addressed, right? Like, you can't ignore stuff like this, especially when you have certain news sites reporting things from their apparent trusted sources. Because say what you want about the majority of the dirt sheets out there, the ones that it's when shit's just completely obviously just made up, it doesn't take, a rocket scientist, as I say frequently, to dissect that, right? You can kind of call it spade a spade. But like when you have certain websites like FightfulSelect.com, for instance, or even, even though I haven't checked it out, but like the Wrestling Observer, you have like PW Torch as a subscription. Like, there's so many different websites out there, so if they're going to put their name on something, they're not going to just put their name on bullshit, and they're going to do their due diligence to follow up on it. Now, on the same token, too, they could be getting 100% accurate information from their source, but their source could be bullshitting them. So, I'm sure the relationship takes a while to build trust, right? But stuff like this, and especially with this story in particular, at first I was like, yeah, okay, like this is just like all, I guess a work, like as much as I hate using like those terms, like it was just one of those things where it felt like a story that they wanted to maybe leak out there to build even more anticipation for next week, because all of a sudden, and granted this was done, they did change the match from the All Out pay-per-view to next Wednesday, which is just obviously a week away, which is just crazy when you think about it. And like I said, we'll get into that a little bit more later on, but there's a reason for that, right? And it's just, I don't know, it something doesn't feel right to me, and I don't really know what to put my finger on quite yet, so that's why another reason too I kind of wanted to get on the pod here and kind of just like verbally dissect everything and get your guys' opinion as well to see kind of where the story is playing out, if it's 100% like just bullshit and just like a work or whatever, and just thrown out there to generate more buzz for next week's Dynamite, then hey, kudos to them. But with the nature of the story, I don't know, like I don't know why, if you're gonna leak a story, like I don't see you wanting to leak a story that's, make believe or something that you guys created specifically to generate whatever your interest for the following week, right? If you're gonna go through the trouble of doing that, then you're gonna want to do something that's not really that big of, or that bad, right? Or that doesn't make you guys look incompetent or make it look like there's any issues internally. So that's why part of me is like, like I something just doesn't feel right. With all this kind of breaking in, especially with the match being next week now, it makes me wonder. At first, the first thought on people's minds were, is it a health issue with CM Punk? Is his foot really not ready to go? But then if that's the case, why would you move it up even quicker? The thought with that is if there's questions of him being cleared and able to go at 100% or even close to 100% at All Out, why would you move it up even quicker, a week later? So that doesn't really fit in there. So the fact that this news kind of broke today that there was speculation on whether he was even going to show up for the August 17th show, which was last night's Dynamite, if he was going to quit AEW altogether. And then in the same story, they're saying that, like there's no plans on Punk leaving AEW, even though there was at one point thought that he was going to quit. So that's why I'm just like, why, like, am I even just wasting my breath and my time right now, even talking about it, but again, it's something you definitely have to touch on. And it's just, I don't know, it's interesting. It's something to obviously keep in mind going forward and kind of see how things play out. And I think that opens up a lot of possibilities for next week and All Out and the months going forward, really, for AEW. And it makes me wonder, too, like, my initial thought, too, with, and not more, one of my thoughts once I realized that the match was moved up to next week, I was like, oh, is this like a ratings thing, Like, why is this going to be something where we get the match next week and then it ends in a DQ, or we don't get an actual conclusion to the match, because AEW doesn't really do that too frequently. We get a lot of brawls and things like that and a lot of referee distractions, but we don't get a lot of actual DQ finishes. So my first thought was like, okay, are we doing this to get like a ratings grab? Which obviously, like I would hope a match of this magnitude, and especially with them being even if it was just Punk versus Moxley, right? Like that would be a big deal. But this is the AEW World Champion facing off against the interim champion, so in a unification match. So this is huge. Like that's what I was saying earlier. This, in all honesty, should be the biggest match in AEW history. You can make your arguments for like your Danielson and your Omega. What was the better like actual wrestling match, or which match you're looking forward to more so for the wrestling or the story or whatever, like that. Like if you want to dissect it like that, you can. But in theory, this should be the biggest match in AEW history, and especially Dynamite. So that's kind of why I peg it there, and that's why again I'm still so kind of just. It's kind of surreal that we're getting it next week, and that's why I'm like, okay, like, are we really gonna get a full match? And then we're gonna kind of blend into the AEW Dynamite review here now, because it's kind of sets us up perfectly for the opening segment of the Dynamite show itself. That opened up with CM Punk. Again, they were in West Virginia, I believe. What was the city? Charleston, of course. West Virginia at the Charleston Coliseum. They, again, opened up with CM Punk, which was a surprise. I don't think that they advertised this going into the Dynamite show itself, so that was a nice surprise to kind of open up the show here. Not a surprise to see Punk, but just to see him, actually start the show and with the promo segment. So, and boy, we had no idea what we were in store for. But before we get into that, it makes you wonder, all kind of taking a step back and looking at everything again, it makes you wonder if things are going sideways, right? And if things aren't going according to plan with the relationship with Punk, or if let's say all of this, everything that we read today and everything that I read out to you guys is 100% true, right? And let's say that we're getting to the point where Tony Khan is like, maybe he feels like he can't trust CM Punk, and he's worried that Punk may just not show up for him one day or what have you. There's, that could change a lot, like that obviously changes your relationship with someone. Trust is a huge thing. So there's a lot on the table, but we'll get into the opening segment here. Punk made his entrance with the title belt over his shoulder. Punk went to the ring. Obviously a whole bunch of CM Punk chants. They loved him there in Charleston, West Virginia. CM Punk went down to the ring and actually said that there was someone from the area that he wanted to challenge and laid the belt down in front of him. Side note, I'm definitely going to have something to say about this later on, so maybe I'll just hold on to that when it comes to the treatment of the title belts. So I'll hold on to that, but hopefully I don't forget. But Punk said that if Hangman Page wants his rematch, he has it on the spot, and pretty much inviting and instigating Page to confront Punk and to come out there and get his rematch right then and right there, which of course you knew wasn't going to happen because Punk was not in his gear. He was in street clothes. Page didn't come out. Punk tapped on the mic, kind of mocking, saying like, like making fun, is this thing on type thing. He stood up and said, that's not cowboy shit, that's coward shit. He said a little bit of advice is that the public apology needs to be as loud as the disrespect. And just the I don't want to say hatred, but just the gumption in his voice and just the power that he said that with, like, man, like, I mean, you guys definitely need to go back and see this whole opening segment if you haven't seen Dynamite yet, but man, like, this just hit kind of different too, and that right there kind of stood out to me as well, because, I mean, first of all, like, Paige is from Virginia, not West Virginia. I mean, it's not far away, but, come on. Yeah, so it was just, I don't know, like, when I saw that, I was like, wow, okay, Punk, like, it's a different side of Punk, like, personally, like, that's that vicious side of Punk that I like, that edgy side of Punk, but it's not necessarily a babyface, especially when you're going after a beloved babyface like Hangman Page and the story that he just went through and everything, so that really stood out to me kind of from the jump. But moving on, Punk said he knows that Jon Moxley has a lot of fans and he might be the number one, or he might be number one in the heart of the fans, but he's not number one in AEW because Punk is the true champion. Punk said Moxley has always been number two, which got some boos and kind of like some reaction from the crowd. That was just the beginning. And after that, Punk, and he would say this kind of repeatedly throughout his segment here, he told the crowd to stop him when he's telling lies. So, I mean, whether you're a babyface or a heel, like, when someone's speaking facts and, like, speaking the truth, like, there's you whether you like it or not, like, there's there's not much you can really say there. And then it kind of got a little bit spicier. Punk went on to say that Moxley is the third best guy in his own group, and that seems to be a recurring theme in his career. Punk said that doesn't make Moxley a bad guy. That he's willing to test himself against Moxley, but Moxley isn't willing to test himself against Punk. I mean, man, like, that right there, the third best guy in his own group, and it seems to be a recurring theme in his career. Like, Jesus Lord, like, dagger after dagger right there. And again, obviously, that's referencing his current group with the Blackpool Combat Club, and of course, back in WWE being in the Shield. But it continued. Punk said Moxley's buddy Eddie Kingston is the third best Eddie he's ever been in the ring with, and the second best Kingston he's ever shared a locker room with. These people aren't number one in anything, Punk said. Tell me when I'm telling lies. And again, that was his go-to there. Again, the Kingston thing obviously is a throwback to Kofi Kingston as well. The Eddie line, I believe, is Eddie Guerrero. So it just kind of shows you Punk's depth too, which is kind of fun to go back and think about. Punk said that he missed the fans and he had yet to defend the title, which is crazy to think about again. He said that he's looking forward to testing himself and his foot against Jon Moxley at All Out. So again, even there is still scheduled for the pay-per-view. Punk said Moxley won't even be the first guy named John who he'll beat in Chicago for a championship. So the final dagger right there, obviously calling out their classic match, Punk versus John Cena in Chicago in 2011. Just fucking fantastic. A Money in the Bank pay-per-view. Just tremendous. Moxley's music finally played, and he walked from the side of the stage with the interim AEW championship over his shoulder. Just, a lot of people didn't like this segment, but I just couldn't help but laughing. Punk said that he knew it was going to take some time before Moxley got out there, so he laid down in the ring and began to create snow angels in the ring. Those of us who have experienced the beautiful time of the year that we are able to get snow, fun thing to do is go out there and make snow angels, right? So that's what Punk was doing in the ring. It's just fucking fantastic. Like a lot of, like, again, a lot of people didn't like that, but whatever it says about me, like it fucking tickled me, man. I was so here for that. And it was true, right? He did have a lot of time, and I'm just so happy that finally someone kind of called that out. It's just perfect. I loved it. But Moxley took a little bit of extra time before entering the ring, and said once he finally made it to the ring, "Look out, ladies and gentlemen, CM Punk is dropping pipe bombs." Here we go. He added that Punk was doing what he does best by letting his mouth write checks that his body can't cash. He said it's just a microphone and it doesn't mean shit, nor does the belt over Punk's shoulder. Moxley said his own belt doesn't mean shit until he beats Punk. Punk told Moxley that he could be the heart and soul of AEW and that Punk will be the dollars and cents, because Moxley had referenced that he himself was the heart and soul. So Punk called himself the dollars and cents. Punk asked Moxley if he was done talking. Moxley said Punk only came to AEW because he ran out of money and everyone knows it. So kind of throwing some shots back there. I don't think, me personally, I don't think they kind of stung as much as Punk. Maybe that's what, maybe Moxley wasn't going too hard, or maybe Moxley was planning on getting a little bit of more time, like weeks to kind of play this out. But nonetheless, it was at least a good comeback there. At least he had something, to say back to him. But Moxley accused Punk of running out of fighting spirit a long time ago. He said that if Punk wants to prove him wrong, he could try to do something about it. And then he said, "I don't think you're going to do shit," to Punk, before dropping the mic. Punk said they have a match at the pay-per-view, and he was afraid that if he touched Moxley now that he would just bleed all over him. Again, Punk was on something else last night, man. Like, it's just fucking tremendous, man. Punk dropped the mic and went nose to nose with Moxley, who had his arms behind his back, kind of egging him on, daring him to take the first shot. Punk shoved Moxley, who then in turn kissed him back on the chin. So that was quite interesting. Punk and Moxley started trading punches after that. Punk was not here for it at all. They got a few blows in before AEW security ran out, of course, to booze before pulling them apart. Punk stood on the second row for a moment to try to kind of jump over security and get back on Moxley. And they kind of just went back and forth before that. And then throughout the promo segment that they had, they were kind of throwing their title belts around. And this is what I was about to say earlier. I'm just not here for that. Like, maybe I'm just too much of a nerd when it comes to stuff like this, but I feel you respect the title. You hold it a certain way. You don't drag it. You don't throw it. Like, and I'm not even talking about just these guys. Like, even the thing that always stood out with me with The Rock was how he would always carry the title. And obviously everyone loves The Rock, right? One of the greatest of all time. I couldn't stand how, and if he ever hears this, I mean, that'd be fucking amazing. But, I would kind of have a discussion with him too and just kind of see why he did it. But, like, I would hate how he would just carry the title, and especially if he was, like, walking with, like, a quicker pace to the ring, and it would kind of, like, he would hold it, just holding his arm down, and was almost dragging on the floor, I just don't like that. And then even Stone Cold Steve Austin, how he would just throw it in the ring. Like, I don't know what it is about me. I mean, I'm not saying that it's fragile, right, and you have to, like, hold it with, like, both hands and shit like that, and you can't be, like, rough with it, but, like, damn, like, you don't have to throw the shit around, like, you don't drag your jacket on the ground, right? Like, like, you hold that shit up, with respect. So, I don't know, that's my little rant. Maybe, hopefully I won't have too many more rants of the night, but it's just, like, I don't know, man, like, just shit, like, I think the disrespect to the title, I think, like, I'm a huge person, like, on respect, like, just in general, so obviously disrespect is really gonna, like, hurt my nerves and all that shit, but, like, yeah, man, like, I just seeing them, and especially Moxley, just pick up and just throw it back and forth. I'm like, all right, man, we get it. Like, just stop, And again, like, that's why I brought up a few other examples, because it's not just him. And I'm sure, like, if I really put more thought into it, I could spend a whole other 45 minutes going on about it. But I'm not going to, because that's not the point here. But that kind of ended the opening segment there. They ended with a pull-apart brawl, which, again, nothing had changed with the match. It was still scheduled to be the main event at All Out for the unification of those two titles. But it was a fucking fantastic open. One of the best verbal, exchanges of this year. Like, I don't know. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and rank all the promos because even recently we've had a lot of bangers, but like, man, like this one just really stood out. Like this just hit on a different level. But moving on, we got a backstage interview with Powerhouse Hobbs being interviewed by Tony Schiavone, and I really enjoyed this one in the segment with Christian Cage that we'll get into later on in the show. These two, obviously, with everything else, this was a packed show, but these two really stood out to me. And Powerhouse Hobbs is just really, I really enjoyed this promo, and I think he's really going to come into his own, and I'm excited to see him kind of have Starks to kind of counteract against. Because Ricky is just so comfortable on the mic, and he's just so natural at it. So I think he's the perfect kind of opponent for Hobbs to go up against. And then I think they balance each other out very well. So I'm totally looking forward to seeing that. But the first match on the card was the best of 3 falls match. Bryan Danielson versus Daniel Garcia. Whew. This match, fucking tremendous. If you like wrestling, like pure wrestling, you enjoyed this match, and I actually may even, after we wrap this up, I actually may go back and rewatch this again, because this is one of those matches where you feel like you saw everything, and then you'll probably go back and watch it again, and you'll be like, oh damn, like I didn't even see that the first time. And it's just tremendous to think how early on in his career Daniel Garcia is, and he's having this type of match with Bryan Danielson twice, like this is, and I don't know what match was better, this match or the first match these guys had against each other, but man, like this was something else. And maybe this one was better because of the ending and there's no bullshit finish or no interference or anything like that, but man, like it was just very, very well done. But the match here itself, look, I would, again, be here for another 40 minutes breaking down hold for hold. But it was pure wrestling, right? And the first fall, rather, was decided. The kind of ending sequence for the first fall was when Danielson applied a triangle sleeper hold. Garcia powered Danielson up and countered into a pile driver, which still makes me nervous every time I see Danielson taking one. Regardless of who does it to him, I love Bryan, I'm just fearful, for his health, but obviously they know what they're doing. It's more like a concerned parent type thing, which is so weird, right? But it's coming from a place of love, not a place of like, oh, these guys don't know what they're doing. So just to kind of, so no one's like, oh, wow, she doesn't trust these guys. No, it's just, I don't want him, I love seeing him wrestle. I want to continue seeing him wrestle, put it that way. But Garcia put Danielson into the Dragon Sleeper hold himself, and he had that locked in for a good amount of time before referee Bryce Bryce, ruled that Danielson was out and ended the fall, and I'm pretty certain that was the way that he ended the first match that these two faced off against, after, I believe it was Jake Hager had tripped up Bryan, and while the referee was distracted, and then Garcia was able to put him in the sleeper hold at that point. I'm pretty certain that's what it was, but that, of course, led into the second fall, and I liked the little attention to detail that they had, or that Garcia had, rather. It was pretty apparent that Bryan Danielson, was still out from the sleeper hold, right? Which would make sense if he was out enough to be considered down for the count, right? Down for that fall. Like, he's not obviously just going to pop right back up. But in that vein, I love that Garcia noticed that and told Bryce to, hey, the referee to, hey, start counting, like if he doesn't get up before the count of 10, like that's another count out, and that's a count out rather than another fall, and that would have sealed the match. And imagine if Daniel Garcia picked up the first one-on-one victory and then came back and won pretty much the 2 out of 3 falls match. Like, man, like, that'd have been something else. But Danielson did end up beating the 10 count to keep the match going. Garcia went right back at Danielson and fired some chops on his chest in the corner. Just brutal, man. Like, those shits, like, I don't know. Garcia backed up a bit and then threw a running drop kick at Danielson into a break. And that was the main thing about this match, man. Like, it was just the commercial breaks. Like, I get it. You can't do it so much, but just... This is one of those matches where you wish you could have just seen it through and through. We did get some footage, though, during the break itself of Garcia, DDTing Danielson on the concrete at ringside. Again, I cringed a little bit. Danielson was bleeding a little bit from the forehead. They got back in the ring, and Garcia executed a reverse suplex, and then threw some elbows at the head of Danielson. Garcia hooked Danielson's head, but Danielson countered into a pin, so they evened up the falls there, one apiece. At that point, we're about 15 minutes deep into the match, which secured the second fall there. Danielson put Garcia on the ropes and gave him a German suplex. Danielson followed up with a missile dropkick. They ended up at ringside. Danielson performed a suicide dive through the middle ropes and threw Garcia into the ring post, hooked his arms around the post, and pulled his shoulder into it twice, which that shit just always looks painful to me too. Like, I don't know how like these dudes just aren't in fucking pain like all the time. Maybe they are, I don't know. But Garcia then returned the favor and took his turns doing the exact same thing back to Danielson. Ricky Steamboat was shown checking the time because he was at ringside. That, shame on me, I didn't mention that. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, legend himself, was at the show. Obviously, they're promoting the House of the Dragon, I believe, show that's coming out. So obviously a play into that. And it was cool too because the American Dragon with Bryan Danielson, and now Garcia's going, off of the Dragon Slayer, so just a cool little plan. But again, he was shown there checking the time. Garcia returned to the ring, and then Danielson barely beat the referee's count, breaking before we went back into a picture-in-picture commercial break. Garcia ended up bleeding too. I'm not sure exactly what happened there. But kind of moving on a little bit for time's sake here. Into the final sequence, Danielson grabbed Garcia's arms, but Garcia flipped him over and threw repeated stomps at him, which, again, the stomps too, man. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, this match was so good. Like, so stiff and so snug. Like, man, like, just brutal. Danielson rolled Garcia onto his back and headbutted his chest several times and then stomped into him. Danielson caught Garcia into another triangle sleeper. Again, going back to that. I love the callback. Garcia tried to power Danielson up again, but he couldn't do it. They traded strikes, and then Danielson applied the bell lock. Danielson threw elbows at the head of Garcia and then wrenched him back until the referee called for the bell. And I love that he won with the bell lock. Just a nice little shout out there. But Danielson ended up winning the best 2 out of 3 falls match in about 26-ish minutes, I believe it was, maybe a little bit shy. But the big segment after this happened, or the big story going forward, rather, after the match, was when Danielson sat in the ring and pointed towards Garcia, and just, yeah, like, there was so much with this, kind of reading over my notes here. Danielson was kind of just looking at him in kind of like amazement and played into the crowd and then offered a handshake to Garcia, who obviously ended up getting back to his feet. Before we could get to that, Jericho entered the ring and hit Danielson from behind before Garcia obviously could obviously like shake his hand if he was going to, or not just do some fuckboy shit and like turn his back on him, or like like do some just fuckboy shit. You know what I mean? We've seen this thousands of times in wrestling, but Jericho continued to just kick the shit out of Danielson and just kind of beat him up until Garcia pulled him off of him. Jericho stuck his finger in Garcia's face, and Garcia ended up slapping it away. And Jericho was like, you better think about this, before Garcia ended up leaving the ring without shaking hands with Danielson again, and just kind of left Jericho there as well. So going into next week, Jericho mentioned later on in the show that he wants to talk with Garcia in the ring. So I think we're going to get a decision whether Daniel Garcia wants to be a sports entertainer or a professional wrestler going forward, because the fans at one point even chanted, "You're a wrestler," to Garcia, I believe when he was making his way to the ring, if I'm not mistaken, at some point though, which was cool, and Garcia is just a star in the making as well, so it's fun to kind of be along for the journey in that. But fucking fantastic match. So another match I'm surprised we got on TV twice, for that matter. So kudos to everyone involved in that, and thank you guys for that. And I hope you're fucking resting right now. But moving on, had a backstage segment. We saw the tag champs Swerve Strickland and Keith Lee with their Rampage challengers Private Party, which came out of nowhere again, unless I'm missing something. Don't really know why they're getting a shot here. They, I guess, are in the top 5, which I guess it was wins on Dark. But hey, whatever. So yeah, I think it was mentioned that the other teams in the top 5 are busy doing something else, so that's why Private Party was getting it. So that's just a weird explanation to me. But Moving on, Tony Nese and Mark Sterling attempted to make their way to the ring. As they were on the stage, Moxley came out and just knocked the shit out of Nese, man. Just clobbered that dude from the back, and it was fucking great. He knocked Sterling out as well, but he just clobbered Tony Nese. Made his way to the ring, Moxley did, and said that, let's do this shit right now, let's get this shit over with. He didn't say shit twice, I have a potty mouth. He said, let's do it right now, let's get this shit over with, and pretty much egging Punk to come back out, which Punk ended up doing, and I think, obviously, this is where in the show it pivoted from being the main event at All Out to all of a sudden it's now next week, which the announcement was officially made in a little bit here, but Punk ended up making his way back to the ring. Security and the producers, officials, came out as well. But it was Claudio that made the biggest difference. Claudio Castagnoli. He fucking just manhandled Moxley, man. Like, this dude just picked him up with one arm. It was just carrying him over to the other side of the ring. It was just like, that tickled me too. Like, when I saw that, I was just like, man, like, just fucking Claudio, man. Like, if he ever is just like over wrestling, that dude could be security. Like, you see him, your ass isn't gonna try to do shit at a bar, club, wherever you're at. Like, no, like, just no. Backstage, Jericho, Matt Menard, and Angelo Parker were interviewed by Shivani. Jericho said that he was going to give Daniel Garcia, this is what I was talking about, a pass, because they had a hell of a match, and was saying that, his emotions were probably just all worked up, and that's when he pretty much, I don't want to say challenged him, but said that they're gonna pretty much settle this shit and figure this shit out next week. But that's when Ricky Steamboat showed up on the interview set and said Jericho is the same guy he met years ago. Said Bryan Danielson is the right guy to mentor Garcia. Jericho said he hasn't liked Steamboat for 15 years and told him to stay out of his business. Jericho stormed away with Matt Menard. Steamboat tried to follow them, but Parker stopped him and kind of started to talk shit to Steamboat, who ended up chopping him. I love Jericho. I just love his little one-liners. And I love that they actually did the callback to WrestleMania 25, because that was the last match, I think, for Steamboat and against Jericho. So that was a cool little moment there. So yeah, that was fun. But that's why I mentioned earlier Steamboat being out there, especially for the Danielson match. Like, I just kind of expected him to do something, Like, I'm glad he didn't maybe get involved. But maybe Garcia, talked shit to him and he, I don't know, did something or just, slapped him or, I don't know, he's out there for a reason. He I guess did his job, but I don't know, it was just, I expected him to get involved. But hey, I like that they actually did something with him backstage, and this was cool. After that, we got the Gun Club versus the Varsity Blondes. This was the most perplexing thing. I even went back to see when because I had stepped out of the room for a second, came back, and the match was over. Legit, this match went, less than a minute. It was so strange. I believe it was Austin Gunn who started the match, and he ended up knocking Pillman off the apron before just, going straight back to Griff Garrison, who was in the ring, tagged in Colton, and Colton hit Garrison with the Colt 45 and just pinned him, in less than a minute, and that was it. I could see kind of, oh my gosh, I just blanked on his name. Brian Pillman Jr. Once him and Garrison were at ringside making their way towards the back, Brian did not look happy at all. So that kind of stood out to me as well. I don't think it was probably supposed to be that prevalent, but for whatever reason, that just really caught my attention. But that was all to set up the angle with Billy Gunn entering, or not Billy Gunn, can't say that, with Billy entering the ring. Pretty much he was going to congratulate his sons, but then out of nowhere, the Gun Club turned their back on Billy and just, I guess, attempted to beat him up, and it was just not a very good beatdown at all. I guess maybe they're scared to beat their dad. Maybe I would have been too. But Stokely Hathaway appeared on the stage as well, while the Gun Club were beating down their dad. That paved the way for the Acclaim to make their way out to make the save. And Daddy Ass, which is very strange to say, ended up siding with the Acclaim. So now all is good in the Acclaimed and Daddy Ass world. Bowens got to say, "Scissor me, Daddy." And Billy seemed to be okay. I with his sons turning on him. I don't know. I guess that's that. But I don't know. It was what it was. I love the Acclaim. I just love that they're good guys. They don't really need Billy, so I'm kind of surprised they went that route. But it is what it is. So moving on. After that, we did end up getting a video package showing Wardlow and FTR beating up Jay Lethal after Sanjay Dutt and Satnam Singh were out at the ring. Lethal, Dutt, and Singh went on the talk, and Singh told Warlord to powerbomb him if he's so strong. So that's setting up that confrontation, which I'm sure we'll be getting a 6-man match probably in the next couple weeks, I'd imagine, really. After that, Jungle Boy made his entrance for an in-ring promo. He spoke about the t-shirt that he wore last week saying Christian Cage is a pussy. So there's that. Cage ended up making his way to the ring a little while after that. There was a moment where Jungle Boy was talking though, and I think someone, like a fan, was saying what? And just Jungle Boy out of nowhere, he just like made like this just glaring stare. It was just like kind of like, oh shit. But this is what I was saying earlier. I just fucking love this version of Christian Cage, man. Like I just the smirkiness and just the I'm better than you type vibe. It's just I love it. But Cage made his way to the ring and said no because Jungle Boy had challenged Cage for a match at All Out, and Cage said no. Pretty much that. He said that they're going to fix their problems. He looks at him as like a son and like a father figure type role, and that he doesn't want to do that. Pretty much want to reconcile and looking to kind of bring it in and kind of go for a hug. Jungle Boy kind of teased that he was going to hug him, but then tackled him and threw punches back at Cage. They again brawled. Cage at one point, they went ringside and said, I loved you piece of shit. So just setting up their match going forward, which I guess is going to be at All Out, or maybe not, since Cage said no. So we'll get that at some point. But backstage, we got Wardlow and FTR just standing at the interview set again with all their titles, and pretty much just kind of retorting back at the... Oh my gosh, I'm going to say the Pinnacle, because they mentioned the Pinnacle, and it kind of stood out like that they said Pinnacle, because obviously you think of like MJF as well. But they challenged Satnam Singh, Sanjay Dutt, and Jay Lethal. So yeah, we'll see. But next week we'll be getting Hardwood versus Lethal. I'm sorry. Next week we'll just be getting, my notes are, my brain is tired. It's been a long day too. Hardwood challenged Lethal for a match next week, which should be fantastic, because Hardwood has just been on another level right now. Next up, we got Tony Storm versus Kylan King. This was pretty good. It was a 5-6 minute match. Nothing too crazy here. Tony Storm ended up getting the victory in a little over 6 minutes rather. But yeah, so that's that. There wasn't really too much to that, but it was a pretty good match, a pretty solid match, and I'd love to see them sign Kylan King if they haven't. I think she'd be a nice addition to the roster. But that just sets up kind of a little bit more momentum for Tony Storm going into All Out, which I'm pretty certain, yeah, they did officially announce the AEW Women's Championship match is going to be Tony Storm versus Thunder Rosa at All Out. So I'm hoping we get a title change there, because we need to do something to shake this shit up. But this is right. This was right in the moment, or right in the show rather, where I thought I'm not going to say it here, but I thought I was in a different realm. I thought I took something that I didn't know, or something that was stronger than I thought, and I was losing my mind, because out of nowhere, I hear CM Punk versus Jon Moxley for the undisputed AEW World Championship for next week's Dynamite. So I was just I even went back, rewound a little bit, and I was like, wait, what the fuck? So just gonna put a pin in it right here and kind of go over my speculation before we get to the main event of the show. Look, with announcing this type of match, you have to deliver it, right? Like, you can't back out of it now. So I think it's gonna be kind of prevalent. One thing that's gonna be obvious and will kind of give us a sign of where the match is gonna go ending wise, is where this match is on the card. My opinion, if it starts the show, we're probably in line for a clean finish, right? But if this match goes on last, main event, and we get it at, 9:45, 9:40, 9:35 even, I see us getting kind of like a DQ-ish type finish. And with that, I think you can go a couple ways. I think you can have Hangman Page come out, and if the idea is, if Tony Khan's idea is he needs a way out of having a clean win, which let me just state too, I'm not advocating for. I think if you're going to out of nowhere announce this huge match on the Dynamite out of nowhere instead of on the main event of your biggest pay-per-view of the year, and you do still have pay-per-views, you don't have a monthly subscription like WWE does on Peacock where we spend what, $5-10 a month. Like, you're asking people to pay $50 however often a year to buy a pay-per-view, and you're taking the for certain like money making match, you're taking that off of it. So if you're putting this on Dynamite, I would plant my flag, and you absolutely have to give a clean finish, 100%. Whether it doesn't matter who's gonna go over, like you gotta deliver. And my preference would be is straight across the board, like no interference when the referees are looking, no bullshit, no nothing. I just have the match, like you're being ballsy enough to put it on free TV, be ballsy enough to deliver an actual finish, you know what I mean? But if we are going to get the rare DQ finish that we don't really get that often in AEW, and keep in mind, distractions and shit like that is completely different than a DQ finish. Like, we can see a lot of like distractions at ringside with the referees and looking, things like that. But it doesn't lead to a DQ because the referee doesn't see it, right? So if you're gonna go that route and have a DQ finish, then I could see someone like a Hangman Page getting involved and costing or in screwing up the match. I'm not really. That's not gonna be my number one for interference. I'll get to that in a second. But for whatever reason with Punk calling out Paige, and I think it's kind of odd too, like all this time has gone past, and if Punk apparently had an issue with whatever Paige said in a promo months ago, like now all of a sudden like you have an issue with it, like that's just kind of strange. But again, that's why none of this, like something's just not right here. That's what I was saying earlier, like some things just aren't sitting right with me in adding up. But you can go that route, or this could be setting up the return of MJF, which we could either get next week in Ohio. MJF could cost Punk the match, or set up the DQ and have whatever reason and whatever explanation to be included in the match at All Out. So now, we're not getting a one-on-one match with Moxley versus Punk. We're gonna get a triple threat where we can get MJF included in that match, or you can even go crazy and make it a fatal four-way, and you can throw Paige in there as well and have Paige, MJF, Moxley, and Punk. That's completely off the wall, but I'm just thinking of all the possibilities that you could do here. And again, this is going a different route, if we're not going to get a clean finish. But yeah, guys, it's just so bizarre that we're getting this match. I'm not complaining at all. Like, hey, shit, like, save me $50. Like, I'm good. I mean, I'm probably still going to buy the pay-per-view, but like, this is give me this match for free. I'm not complaining, like, hey, it's not my job to worry about the business, right? Like, I worry as a fan because I love AEW and I want them to do well and I want them to thrive, and get the best business deals possible. But technically, it's not my job, as fans, it's not our jobs to worry about any of our favorite sports teams or any of our favorite artists or anything like that, like the business side of it, like that's just, it's just, we're just here to enjoy what we see and to be entertained by what we see on TV. So, I don't know, guys. Obviously, it makes for must-see TV next week, and if they don't crack 1 million next week, then I don't know what the fuck we're doing, like, it's just, that's something else. But I think there's a lot of ways we can go. I don't know. I'm gonna wait until the next show that I do this weekend and see if we get any more information. Maybe that's cheating before I make my prediction, but if I had to make one right now, I don't even know. Because it really depends, too, on the direction you want to take Punk's character. Like, that, with this match happening next week, I don't know. And in this flip side, if the story is true and Punk really is unhappy and there was concern that he wasn't going to show up, maybe Punk's out, right? What if this was the way that, Tony Khan was like, okay, cool, like, you're not happy, like, you didn't want to show up, like, you don't want to be here, like, all right, like, you're gonna lose the championship, you're gonna, do the honors or whatever, and do the favors and go home for a while, just like you did with MJF. We still don't know 100% on what's going on with that story, but I don't know, everything has a weird way of like kind of intertwining, and this has a weird similarity with Punk's whole contract dispute with WWE back in 2011, and how the whole pipe bomb thing even came to fruition, and Punk taking the title and leaving. And I don't know, like, it's just, I can see someone like MJF being like, look, because if you think about it, the one thing you could say with MJF coming back is like, oh, well, he just pretty much, like, eviscerated Tony Khan on TV and called him a fucking mark and all this shit. Like, why would Tony Khan bring him back and put him in a championship match? MJF can simply say, look, I'm worth X amount of dollars. You don't even have to say amount. He can even say I'm worth a shit ton of money, or however he wants to phrase it. And just, he could say Tony Khan put his money where his mouth was and paid up, and he knows what I'm worth, and that's that, you know? And because that was the gripe. He just wanted to be paid what he felt like he was worth. And that's it, you know? Like, that that's the end of that. You know what I mean? And he can even say that Tony Khan paid me to save. And that's what I'm thinking too, because, like, if you want to do, like, this angle where MJF is coming in to save AEW from, because that was what Hangman Page had referenced too in his promo against Punk, that he was going to save AEW from Punk. So MJF can kind of pick that up and be like, Tony Khan put his money where his mouth was. I'm getting paid what I needed to get paid, so that's subtle, however he wants to phrase that. And now I say, you know, like, I'm here to save AEW. Like, Tony Khan was fearful of history repeating itself, and that's why I'm here, you know? And of course, frame it how he wants to, and depending on, it's kind of hard to really speculate right now without having the meat and potatoes of the story, but you guys kind of get the direction that I'm heading in. But again, there's so much to kind of dissect, so I'll get into that maybe on the follow-up show here. But that led us to the main event and the return of the Omega Man, Kenny Omega. Of course, he teamed up with Matt and Nick Jackson to face off against Andrade, Rush, and Dragon Lee in the AEW Trios Titles Tournament first round match. I mean, there's really not much you can say about Kenny Omega's return, right? Although I was a little concerned, and he got me, right? Like, at first I was like, oh man, did he come back too soon, but is he still, like, kind of, like, sore? Is he, you know, still working out some kinks type thing? But I think this is all, like, playing into the story of just Omega rebuilding himself, and that's kind of visually seeing it. So I think we're gonna kind of get more of, like a layer by layer dissection of us seeing, like, the restructure of Kenny Omega, and then just them going on this, like, powerful run as champions. But this match was just phenomenal, and it was I'm not going to spend too much time getting into it here. The main focal point here was Kenny Omega is back, and of course the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega did end up picking up the victory here. There was a crazy spot where Andrade was sitting and opening the ropes for Dragon Lee, and Rush and their manager, I forget his name, it's just escaping me right now, it's late, guys, we're holding up Omega on top of the ringside barricade, and Dragon Lee just came through and just launched himself through the middle ropes onto Omega, and that brought them out to the front row and just ran into the fans. That was a fucking crazy moment. I'm sure you'll see a gif of that. But like I was saying, guys, the ending sequence came when Omega came back and connected with the V-trigger on Lee. Omega then hoisted Lee up for the finisher, while the Bucks held off Andrade and Rush. Omega hit the one-winged angel on Lee and pinned him. And again, he was being very ginger with the movements there. So, again, that's why I was just kind of concerned. But like I said, I think it's just kind of all playing into the bigger story here. But that, at the ending part of the match, right before they went off the air, you could see Andrade untying Dragon Lee's mask. And then all of a sudden, they just, it was Andrade who gave him a hammerlock DDT out of nowhere, and the mask came off. They covered his face back up really quick, and then it just went off of the air. The last thing we saw was Omega and the Bucks just walking back or they started to walk back to the ring, but then the show went off the air at that point. So that was a different way to end, but guys, what a fucking day, what a fucking show last night from Dynamite, what news that we got today. This is just the beginning, I'm sure. We'll see what plays out. We'll see what news breaks in the days coming forward. I'll be talking to you guys very, very soon, I'm sure. So thank you for checking out this long edition and this kind of earlier review. But like I said, with the news of the CM Punk drama unfolding and whether that's real, whether it's not, it's just fun to be a fan and fun to speculate and fun to talk shit about wrestling. So thank you guys for listening. Hope you have a fantastic night.